Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a close look at something that's, well, increasingly important if you're navigating the U.S. immigration system,
hmm
and that's how closely immigration authorities are examining social media.
Yeah, it's a big one these days.
It really is. We've gathered a whole range of sources to try and give you the full picture. Everything from official USCIS policy manuals and a DHSA privacy impact assessment.
Right, the official stuff.
Exactly. But also articles from groups like the EFF and Truthout, some practical advice from NOLO, Visa Verge,
Mm.
even local news like the Tampa Bay Times.
And we've got perspectives from places like Reddit forums and immigration lawyers on YouTube too, right?
We do. So our goal today really is to make it clear what immigration authorities are actually looking for online. What's the legal basis for this? What could the consequences be for you?
And crucially, what steps you might be able to take to protect yourself. Because it's a landscape it's definitely changing fast. And staying informed is really key. Our sources definitely point towards, more scrutiny.
Okay, so let's dive in. Maybe we should start with the USCIS Policy Manual. It talks quite a bit about fraud and willful misrepresentation. That seems fundamental here.
Absolutely. That's often the justification or part of it.
So the manual draws a line between willful misrepresentation and fraud. What's the key difference there for people to understand?
Well, what's really interesting and kind of critical to grasp is that for willful misrepresentation, the policy actually says intent to deceive isn't required.
Oh, really? No intent needed.
Nope. It just means you made a statement that was false about something important, a material fact, they call it, and you made it deliberately to a U.S. government official to get some kind of immigration benefit.
Huh. So even if you didn't mean to mislead, say you got your dates wrong or something about a past job, that could still be willful misrepresentation.
If it was a material fact and you stated it, yes, that's the implication. And it counts even if you tried to get the benefit but didn't succeed. You could still be found inadmissible.
Wow. Okay. That sounds pretty serious, especially if it was an honest mistake about something important.
It is. Now,
Yeah.
fraud, that's different. That does require intent to deceive. That's the core element.
Right.
You have to knowingly make a false statement about something material, specifically aiming to trick the official. And the official has to, believe it and grant you a benefit based on that lie.
Okay, so fraud is definitely about a deliberate attempt to cheat the system. And the manual says if you're found to have committed fraud, you've automatically committed willful misrepresentation too.
Exactly. Fraud includes misrepresentation. It's like a package deal.
Gotcha.
And remember, this is important. Even attempting to get a benefit through fraud or misrepresentation, even if you fail, can make you inadmissible. For a failed fraud attempt, you still needed that intent, even if they didn't fall for it.
And the consequences if they do make that finding, fraud or willful misrepresentation. The manual mentions something pretty severe.
Oh yeah, it's incredibly serious. The standard penalty is a lifetime bar from being admitted to the U.S.
A lifetime bar.
A lifetime bar. The only way around it, potentially, is if you can get a waiver, and those aren't guaranteed, obviously. That's why the policy says officers have to be really careful and look at all the facts. The stakes are incredibly high for the individual.
No kidding. A lifetime bar really hammers home why being accurate and truthful is so critical. Okay, so that's the USCIS angle. What about ICE? We have this DHS privacy impact assessment on their use of publicly available information, or PAI. That includes social media, right?
Yes, definitely includes social media.
So how do they define PAI and social media, just so we're clear?
Okay, so according to DHS, PAI is basically any information that's not classified and is, public. Stuff published or broadcast, available by subscription, something you can just see or hear by being there, info from public meetings, or obtained by visiting public places.
So pretty broad.
Very broad. It includes open source information, and social media is exactly what you'd think. Websites, apps, online tools for connecting, sharing, talking, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, blogs, photo sharing, all that stuff, but not internal government networks.
Okay. And ICE's HSI Homeland Security investigations, what are they doing with all this PAI, including social media stuff?
Right. So HSI is the main investigative part of DHS. They fight criminal organizations exploiting U.S. systems, and that includes immigration fraud, like we just talked about with USCIS.
Mm-hmm.
So they use PAI and social media for leads, usually tied to existing investigations. Things like national security threats, financial crimes, trafficking, smuggling, child exploitation. and immigration fraud.
So it's generally linked to an active case. They're not just like randomly scrolling through everyone's vacation photos.
That's the principle laid out in the PIA, yes. It's usually connected to an open investigation. However,
How,
well, they do mention a couple of other uses. HSI might use PAI for compliance checks on schools in the Student Exchange Visitor Program, SEVP, verifying things like the school's location from its application using public info.
okay, for schools hosting foreign students.
Right. And they also mentioned using PAI to investigate F1 and M1 student visa holders if they suspect overstays or other visa violations. So students should be aware of that.
How are they doing this? Is it just manual searching, or are they using, fancy tools?
The PIA acknowledges they use tech, various tools to collect and analyze PAI, even network analysis tools to see connections between people.
Okay.
But, and this is important, there are supposed to be limits. The info collected has to be relevant to an open investigation, and they need to verify it with other evidence before using it against someone.
And what about private accounts, if your profile isn't public?
They generally can't try to bypass privacy settings. The PIA states restrictions on accessing restricted content or using tools to circumvent user controls.
Okay, good to know. The PIA also mentioned a least intrusive means doctrine. What's that about?
It basically means they should start with the least invasive way to get information. So look at public internet searches first before trying anything more involved, assuming those other methods are even allowed.
Right. So start simple. And are there rules against targeting people based on race, religion, that sort of thing?
Yes, absolutely.
Ooh.
The PIA is clear. DHS prohibits using protecting characteristics, race, ethnicity, gender, origin, religion, sexual orientation, etc., in investigations, except in really specific, limited situations with a compelling government interest, and it has to be narrowly tailored. That's a key safeguard.
Good. What about approvals, if they are using automated tools or keyword searches?
Needs supervisor approval,
Yeah.
and it has to be documented. The keywords themselves must be relevant to suspected criminal activity.
Not just general phishing expeditions.
Exactly. And they specifically say keywords must avoid profiling based on First Amendment rights, like political or religious speech. They're not supposed to target people just for their opinions.
And the data they collect, what happens to it? Can people see it or fix mistakes?
It's kept in their systems according to standard record rules, with retention schedules outlined in other documents. But the Privacy Act has limitations for law enforcement systems. So generally, individuals don't have a right to just access and amend info in ICE systems.
Oh.
They do have a contact point for requests, but it's case by case. They also admit the info might be inaccurate sometimes and say they rely on traditional investigation methods to verify things. So access and correction are limited.
And what if they use outside contractors? Some articles mention that.
Yeah, they do use vendors. ICE gives them guidelines, apparently, to avoid collecting First Amendment protected stuff. And ICE is supposed to oversee the data the vendors collect, trying to ensure rights are considered even then.
Okay. And I remember the EFF article mentioned something about extreme vetting being rebranded.
That's right. The lawsuit documents showed that the initiative, which focused on screening immigrants using online data for potential threats, is now largely called the Visa Lifecycle Vetting Initiative.
Visa lifecycle vetting. So still focused on vetting, using online data and technology, potentially AI.
Seems to be the core idea, yeah.
Yeah.
Vetting throughout the whole visa process.
Okay, this brings us to some of the concerns raised in the other sources about increased scrutiny. That catch and revoke initiative sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, the Exiled for Expression article discussed that. It was reportedly initiated by the Secretary of State to cancel visas of foreign nationals suspected of supporting designated terrorist groups based partly on social media activity.
And they revoked hundreds of student visas quickly.
That's what the report said, yeah, which definitely raised alarms about potential overreach, especially if AI is involved in flagging people. The consequences are obviously huge and immediate for visa holders.
And that internal directive for consular officials to actively search all visa applicants' social media for derogatory information and take screenshots, that feels like a big expansion.
It certainly sounds like it. Requiring officials to hunt for and document anything they consider derogatory. Some observers, as the article notes, worry this could mirror past efforts on defining unlawful presence, potentially leading to quick removal orders if a visa gets revoked. It means your whole online footprint is under the microscope during the application.
Then there was the Truth Out article about ICE maybe wanting contractors to monitor negative posts about ICE itself. Citing threats. That's a different angle.
Yeah, that report suggested a focus on identifying perceived threats against the agency or its staff based on online sentiment, looking for potential indicators of violence. So even expressing strong opinions about the agency might put you on their radar in that context.
And the Tampa Bay Times piece on USCIS specifically scrutinizing social media for anti-Semitic activity in various applications, green cards, visas, citizenship.
Right. That announcement specified looking at social media of LPRs, students, and people linked to institutions associated with anti-Semitic activity. And attorneys and rights groups immediately raised concerns about free speech and potential misuse. You know, how broadly is anti-Semitic activity defined? How is it applied?
It highlights how specific viewpoints are becoming targets, and we even saw that report about the Columbia student allegedly facing deportation linked to pro-Palestinian activism.
Exactly. These examples really drive home the worry that online expression, especially on hot-button political topics, is increasingly factoring into immigration decisions with potentially severe outcomes.
So let's bring it down to the individual. What's the practical impact here? Based on what Verge and that lawyer's video were saying, it seems pretty clear both ICE and USCIS are actively looking.
Yes, the sources are unambiguous on that. They're searching for mismatches between what you put on your forms and what's on your social media.
Like what specifically?
Things like your job history, where you say you live, your marital status. If your Facebook says you're single, but your visa application says married, or if you claim unemployment, but your LinkedIn is active, that kind of stuff. The lawyer's video really stressed those discrepancies.
Okay. And what kind of posts are major red flags?
Well, the obvious ones. Posts about crime, anything that looks like hate speech, anti-Semitism, as we mentioned, support for terrorism, involvement in scams. Those are definite triggers. Verge and the lawyer both warned those could lead straight to denial, deportation, or at least a deeper investigation.
And it's not just recent stuff, right? Old posts, deleted stuff, even private accounts could theoretically be fair game. People on Reddit seemed worried about that.
That's a really critical point. Your digital footprint lasts a long time. Deleting doesn't always mean gone archives. Screenshots exist. And while privacy settings help, as we said, if there's an investigation, they might find ways, or something leaks, it can still surface. You can't assume privacy settings make you invisible to scrutiny.
So, okay. Given all this, what's the advice? How can people protect themselves? Sisu Legal and Verge had some practical tips.
Yeah, the advice across the board is pretty consistent. First, go back and look at your old posts. Seriously review them. Delete anything that looks risky now.
Like a social media spring cleaning.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Second, keep your accounts private whenever possible. It adds a layer, even if not foolproof. Third, just don't post about anything criminal, not even as a joke. Not even about something minor from years ago.
Right, don't give them ammunition.
Exactly. Fourth, maybe dial back negative or hostile comments about the U.S., especially if you're actively seeking an immigration benefit. Think about how things could be misinterpreted. Could that joke be seen as supporting violence? Could that political rant be twisted?
Be your own censor, almost.
To some extent, yeah. If in doubt, probably best not to post, share, or even like something potentially problematic. And Sisu Legal added a good point. Even a sloppy LinkedIn profile could hurt your credibility. Make sure things line up.
And the lawyer strongly recommended getting legal advice before applying, especially if social media info is required.
Absolutely crucial advice. An immigration attorney can look at your specific online presence and give tailored guidance on potential risks. Because, as Verge put it, what seems harmless to you might look very different through an immigration officer's eyes.
Okay, so let's try to sum this all up. The big takeaway seems to be U.S. immigration authorities, USCIS, ICE, they're increasingly using social media. It's a tool for them.
Definitely. They're using it to check for inconsistencies, look for problematic views, search for links to anything illegal. It's part of the assessment now.
It's not just about the forms anymore. Your online life is part of your immigration profile, whether you like it or not.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
Understanding that and being cautious online is just really, really important now if you're involved with the U.S. immigration system.
For anyone wanting to dig deeper, the DHS Privacy Impact Assessment and that USCIS Policy Manual chapter on fraud are probably the best starting points for the official view.
Yeah, and those EFF lawsuit documents might offer more insight into the vetting programs, too. Worth a look if you're really interested in the nitty-gritty.
Which leads us to a final thought for everyone listening. With social media being so central to our lives, and now playing this growing role in immigration, How do you balance that right to express yourself freely online with these potential, very real immigration consequences?
That's the tough question, isn't it? Something definitely worth thinking about carefully as you navigate both the digital world and potentially the immigration process.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.